Imagine stepping aboard the most luxurious ship ever built. A floating palace. The pinnacle of human engineering. A ship so impressive. People called it unsinkable. And then, just 4 days into its maiden voyage, disaster struck. More than 1,500 people would lose their lives. And over a century later, many people still ask the same question, right pointing finger emoji: did the Titanic really sink because of an iceberg? Or was something much deeper responsible? Because the truth behind the Titanic disaster is far more complicated than most people realize. In 1912, the Titanic represented humanity's confidence. Built by thousands of workers and operated by the White Star Line, it was the largest passenger ship on Earth. Everything about it screamed luxury. Elegant dining halls, grand staircases, swimming pools, and technology considered revolutionary for its time. People believed the future had arrived. But history has a way of reminding us that confidence and invincibility are not the same thing. Let's be honest, today, if the Wi-Fi stops working for 10 minutes, people act like civilization is collapsing. Passengers aboard the Titanic were crossing the Atlantic with far fewer conveniences, and a lot more faith. But beneath all the luxury, a series of decisions had already begun setting the stage for tragedy. On the night of April 14, 1912, warnings about ice had been received throughout the day. Several nearby ships reported dangerous conditions. But Titanic continued forward. Fast. Very fast. At around 11:40 p.m., lookouts spotted something directly ahead. An iceberg? They had less than a minute to react. The crew desperately tried to turn. But it was too late. The iceberg scraped along the side of the ship. And while the damage looked minor, it proved catastrophic. Water began flooding multiple compartments. The unsinkable ship had been mortally wounded. But here's where the story becomes shocking. Because the iceberg itself wasn't the only reason Titanic was doomed. Titanic's watertight compartments were impressive. But they weren't tall enough. As water spilled from one section to another, the ship slowly sealed its own fate. And then came another problem. There weren't enough lifeboats. Not even close. The ship carried about 2,200 people, but had room in lifeboats for only around half. Why? Because regulations were outdated. And many believed the ship itself was the best lifeboat. Meanwhile, confusion spread. Some lifeboats left half empty. Precious minutes were lost. And the freezing Atlantic Ocean became the greatest enemy of all. Think about that for a second. The world's most advanced ship didn't have enough lifeboats. That's like buying the newest smartphone and forgetting to include a battery. As the boat sank lower, reality became impossible to ignore. Musicians continued playing. Families stayed together. Acts of courage and sacrifice unfolded everywhere. Then, at 2:20 a.m., the Titanic disappeared beneath the Atlantic Ocean. And with it, more than 1,500 lives. The world would never forget that night. But perhaps the most important question isn't how the Titanic sank. It's why. Yes, an iceberg caused the damage. But the disaster itself was the result of something much bigger. Overconfidence. Ignored warnings. Outdated safety standards. human mistakes, and a belief that technology had conquered nature. In reality, the Titanic wasn't destroyed by one thing. It was destroyed by a chain of failures. And that's often how history works. Not with one dramatic mistake, but with many small ones. Think about this: how many disasters throughout history started with people believing nothing can go wrong? The Titanic remains one of history's greatest tragedies. Not because it was unsinkable, but because it proved that nothing truly is. And more than a century later, its story continues to remind us of something timeless: nature doesn't care about human pride. And history often punishes arrogance. And speaking of mysteries that continue to haunt history, there's another video you absolutely need to watch. Right pointing finger emoji, click the video on your screen now. The creepiest unsolved cases ever, from vanished colonies to unidentified killers, to mysteries that still have no answers. Trust me, those stories are just as chilling.